Hi everyone, it's Clarice. This is Clarice Reads, and today I'm going to be sharing with you the books that I read this November. The first book I read was Illusions, The Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah by Richard Bach. I'd rather not give a synopsis for this book because this book is really short, but I think you can already get a little bit of an idea of what this book's about based on the title. I think the main thing that stood out to me about this book was just how quotable it was. There were so many quotes that I had to write down from this book, even though it's such a short book. There's one quote in particular that really resonated with me at the time that I read this because of my current life situation at the point that I read it, and that quote is, "Your only obligation in any lifetime is to be true to yourself." I feel like I was able to get out of this book the message that I needed to hear at that time, and I feel like because of that, if I ever read this book again, I'm going to be able to get a completely different message out of it, and I do look forward to doing that eventually, hopefully. The next book I read in November was Inside Out by Tina Seelig, which is a non-fiction book that aims to create a sort of framework for the process of entrepreneurship. This was a book given to me by my dad for my birthday. He mostly reads non-fiction. Actually, he exclusively reads non-fiction. I don't think I got a lot out of this book. Though it was done through stories, it was still a lot of the same concept over and over and over again. And I feel like I could have gotten like the main gist of this book by just reading the table of contents. I mean, I still got some good ideas out of this book, and there were some specific experiences that were shared that I found really interesting, but overall, again, I feel like this book just had one main point and just expounded on it in multiple ways that didn't really add more substance to it. The next book I finished in November was The Lies of Locke Lamora, which is the first book in the Gentleman Bastard series by Scott Lynch. This is a series that I've been wanting to start for like 1 or 2 years already because it sounded so interesting. I just knew it was a fantasy book that had to do with an elaborate heist. I basically loved everything about it. I loved the humor of the book, first of all. It was so funny at points, and I loved the characters' banter and that sort of thing. I also loved the plot. I feel like there were small details of it that I was able to guess, but overall there were many points in this book where I just had no idea where it was going, and I love when plots keep me guessing. And of course, I love the characters. I love being able to see them in the present time as well as go back and see how they grew up and how relationships with each other formed. A lot of the characters just had so many layers to them, and I love when characters are more complex. And overall, it's just a really good book, and I'm really looking forward to reading the second book and then the third book, and I don't think there's a fourth book yet. When the hell is the fourth book coming out? Anyway, Lies of Locke Lamora, really good book, did not disappoint at all. The next thing I read in November was the 5th Blacksad story, Blacksad Amarillo. I'm still not totally sure if that's how you pronounce it, but you can see it on the book. Blacksad is about a private investigator named Blacksad. Aside from that, and the fact that it's a crime noir type graphic novel and that all the characters are drawn as animals, I don't feel like you need to know much else. You've heard me rave about Blacksad before. The art is amazing. I love how it deals with such heavy themes, and while the art here is amazing and it did deal with some heavier themes, I feel like this was the weakest Blacksad story that I've read so far. I don't think the plot flowed as well as I would have liked it to, if that makes sense, and I just don't like how a lot of what happened were just such convenient coincidences, be it convenient for the characters or convenient to allow the plot to move along. I really don't like it when things are unrealistically convenient for the characters, or if things are being done seemingly just to allow the plot to progress. This story did that a bit. That being said, again, it's the most disappointing Blacksad story I've read so far, but it's still good, just not nearly as good as the other ones. Next, I read Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. This is one of those classic dystopian novels, and I hope to read a lot more because what I've read so far I really enjoyed, like 1984 and We. What I feel is different about Brave New World as compared to most dystopian novels though, most dystopian novels are kind of totalitarian. They've lost their freedom because they're being prevented or being regulated in a way wherein they can't do all of the things that they would do otherwise. In Brave New World, on the other hand, everyone is put in this caste system wherein there are obviously rankings, like there are the alphas, the betas, and then like the deltas and that sort of thing. But even though they're in this caste system, everybody's happy, not because they're genuinely happy, but because as babies they were conditioned to enjoy doing whatever the people in their caste was meant to do. So people that are in lower castes, for example, when they're babies, they're deprived of oxygen so their brains won't be able to develop well enough, or being shocked when they see flowers so they'll be conditioned to hate the outdoors, or repeatedly hearing words while they're asleep so they'll grow up and learn to hate the color khaki. And I feel like it's actually scarier because you don't have freedom, but you don't really feel like you don't have freedom. And it's so interesting. This book really made me think a lot because even though everyone's happy, it's an artificial happiness. And like I said, I feel like that's even scarier than actually knowing that you are being stripped of your freedom, because this way no one's ever going to contest anything because everyone thinks that everything is totally fine. And everyone thinks that they're happy when it's not happiness. It's just conditioning and drugs and escaping from reality and from actual problems. And it's meaningless. I love books that are really fascinating. I love books that make me think, and this was perfect for that, and I'm so glad that I finally got around to reading it. The next book I read was Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. Before I read this, I kept trying to read other books. There are books I'd pick up, I'd read the first page, I wouldn't be into it, put it down. And pick up another book, read a few pages, put it down. I didn't seem to feel like reading any books, but at the same time, I really wanted to read. Then I just realized, who's that one author whose work I will always be in the mood to read, no matter what? It's Brandon Sanderson, and the only Brandon Sanderson book that I owned that I hadn't read yet was Elantris, which I'd been hesitant to pick up because it was his first published book. I don't hear anyone really talking about it as if it's their favorite Brandon Sanderson or praising it a lot, so I had really low expectations actually going into this book. But it was amazing. As mentioned in Brave New World, I love sci-fi books because they're fascinating, but I love high fantasy books because of the world building. I love learning about fictional places, fictional cultures, fictional religions, and all that sort of stuff, and seeing how they all interact. This book was just so great with that. It had the clashing of religions, it had like the manipulation of politics, and as usual with Brandon Sanderson books, it had amazing characters. I think the main character, Sarene, I'm not sure if that's how it's pronounced, but that's how I pronounce it in my head. Sarene, she's probably one of my favorite Brandon Sanderson characters ever because she just stands up for herself and for what she believes in, even if it may rub other people the wrong way. She just reminds me a lot of my mom, because my mom's really like that. She doesn't care about what other people think about what she does, as long as she's protecting the people that she loves and that she cares about. Serena just reminded me of my mom so much, which is why I enjoyed her as a character so much. But even the other characters were really good, and it amazes me that this was his first published novel. I was pleasantly surprised by this book because, again, I went into it with really low expectations for whatever reason. Lesson learned, never underestimate Brandon Sanderson. And the last thing I read this month was Sweet Tooth, the Deluxe Edition, Book 1. I've mentioned Jeff Lemire a lot on this channel this year because I've just loved everything I've read of his. I read the first volume of Descender, also read the entirety of Plutona, though that's only 5 issues, and I also read Essex County, which I loved, but I hadn't read Sweet Tooth, which is actually the comic by Jeff Lemire that I've heard the most praise for, at least on BookTube. It's another book that's set in a kind of dystopian future wherein suddenly there was this plague that started taking the lives of a lot of people. And then soon after this plague started, these animal-human hybrids started to be born. And they later find out that these animal-human hybrids are actually immune from the plague. So what does that mean about the plague? What is it about these animal-human hybrids that causes them to be immune? And why the hell are they being born anyway? Because it goes against all logic and all science that any people know about. And I'm so glad I picked this up, and I'm so glad I got the deluxe edition so it could be like 2 volumes at once, because I don't think I would have enjoyed it as much if I just read the first volume, because the first arc of this I actually found like really predictable, but after that it just got so much better. Weirdly, this book actually reminds me of a couple of things. Aspects of it remind me of Why the Last Man, mainly the aspects involving the plague and a certain group of people being immune to it, and why the hell is that happening. But the characterization and obviously the art, because it's drawn by the same person, reminds me a lot of Essex County actually. And I loved Essex County because of the characters. And like Essex County, this book really surprised me in the sense that it was able to really hit me emotionally at times. So overall, like I said, really good characters and such a fascinating concept. I have no idea where it's going to head after this, so I'm really looking forward to reading the next deluxe edition as soon as possible. So those were all the books I read this November. How was your reading month this November, and what was your favorite thing that you read? Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye!